He fired her without a word, just because she dared to say she wasn't part of his schedule. Matthew Carlyle, a cold-hearted billionaire, treated people like contracts and emotions like liabilities. But Sophia wasn't someone he could control, and her quiet exit triggered a downfall he never saw coming. But just wait until you hear how this story turns, and why justice, in the end, had the final word. Matthew Carlyle wasn't just wealthy, he was untouchable. A titan of finance, with an ego carved from marble and a soul that Wall Street would have shorted long ago if anyone believed it existed. He owned the top 5 floors of the Carlyle Tower in Manhattan, not rented, owned. His schedule was military, his voice monotone. His employees referred to him as the algorithm. He wasn't cruel in the traditional sense. He didn't shout, throw things, or demand perfection. He simply expected it, coldly, without mercy. He once fired a CFO for being emotionally inefficient. The man had cried after his dog died. Nobody dared to challenge him. Nobody dared to speak casually. Nobody except for the new maid, Sophia Brooks, 27, Oklahoma-born, with calloused hands and a spine made of quiet steel. She took the cleaning job out of necessity. After her mom passed, she left her teaching degree behind to raise her younger brothers. New York was supposed to be temporary, just long enough to send money back. She never meant to cross Matthew Carlyle, but one morning she accidentally spilled a glass of water on the marble entryway. She knelt to wipe it, only to hear that cold voice cut through the silence. "You're fired." Sophia didn't flinch. She looked up straight into the storm-gray eyes of the man no one dared to face. "Then I guess you'll have to fire me again tomorrow," she said calmly, "because no one else in this place seems to care if your home feels like a mausoleum." He stared at her. No one had spoken to him like that since, maybe ever. She wasn't fired. From that day forward, he noticed her. Not in the way a man notices a woman, in the way a fortress notices the tremor before the earthquake, the way she hummed old country songs while scrubbing the counters, how she folded towels with surgical precision, how she referred to him, when she thought he couldn't hear, as the Ice King. He hated it. And yet, he started coming home earlier. Weeks passed. Sophia never crossed any lines. She kept to her duties, kept her distance, and never lingered where she wasn't needed. But somehow, her presence grew louder in its silence. She didn't speak more. She just became impossible to ignore. Like a draft of warm air in a freezing room, her absence was noticed the moment she left, and her return carried weight no one dared acknowledge. Matthew found himself listening for the rhythm of her footsteps. He began to recognize the faint scent of her shampoo before she entered a room. He noticed how she folded towels with care, as if they were fragile letters, and how, when no one was looking, she paused by his bookshelf just a second too long. He told himself it didn't matter, until one evening. He came home early, earlier than usual, and quieter than he meant to. The penthouse was still and dim, the only light coming from a single lamp in the corner of the living room. And there she was, sitting on his cream-colored couch, legs tucked beneath her, lost in a hardcover from his private collection. Her brows were knit together in thought, and her lips moved faintly, as if reading to herself. She hadn't heard him enter. He stood there watching, not angry, not offended, just frozen. When she finally looked up and saw him, she stood abruptly, eyes wide. I'm sorry," she stammered. "I didn't think you'd be home yet." "This is private property," he said, voice cold, sharp. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. She simply lowered her eyes and said, softly, "I know, it gets lonely here, and books, they don't judge." He should have told her to leave. He didn't. Instead, he walked over, slow, uncertain, and sat down on the opposite end of the couch. He didn't look at her right away, and then he asked quietly, "Are you always alone?" Her answer came in a whisper. "Since my mom passed, mostly, yes." What followed wasn't planned. It wasn't some emotional unraveling. It was just two people, sitting in the same silence, finding a shared language in stories and pasts they'd never told anyone else. They talked about childhood, about broken trust, about people who were supposed to stay but didn't. He told her, not with emotion but with clarity, how his mother once told him he was a mistake, how his wife left him for his best friend, how money filled rooms but not silence. 2 hours passed like minutes. When she left that night, the apartment didn't feel empty. The next morning, Sophia received a quiet salary increase, no explanation. The day after, he told her she could use the kitchen if she ever needed it. A week later, she found a stack of books on the counter, all carefully selected in her favorite genre. He never said he picked them, but she knew. Still, at work, he remained the same, ice-cold, efficient, unshakable. But at home, he changed. His hand might brush against hers when passing by. He'd linger just long enough to ask how her day was, not out of courtesy, but curiosity. Sophia kept her distance, not because she felt nothing, but because she felt too much, and she didn't trust what any of it meant, not yet. But one evening she found him standing by the fireplace, his back tense, phone still in his hand from a call that clearly hadn't gone well. His eyes were distant, jaw clenched. Without thinking, she stepped closer and gently placed her hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to do it all alone," she said, barely above a whisper. He turned, and then, without words, without warning, he kissed her. It wasn't practiced. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even romantic in the classic sense. It was quiet, sudden, like someone afraid of losing something he didn't even realize he needed until that very second. And she didn't pull away. She didn't lean in either. She simply let the moment exist, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. After that night, Matthew changed, but not in the way that mattered. He didn't become more open. He became more organized, like he was trying to schedule connection, to fit tenderness into boxes on a calendar. Flowers arrived every other morning. Dinner reservations were booked 2 weeks in advance. His texts came at precisely 8:15 p.m. and ended at 9 o'clock sharp. And yet, not once did he ask how her day really was. Not once did he tell her how he felt, only what he planned. Sophia tried to adjust. At first, she told herself this was just his way, that maybe his gestures were enough. But deep down, she felt herself drowning in the silence between his words. In a world where everything was controlled, measured, and wrapped in perfect, empty symmetry, she was the only variable. And then, one night, sitting across from him at a perfectly set table, she finally spoke. "Matthew," she said, her voice quiet but steady, "I'm not your transaction. I'm not a schedule or a contract or an offer or a performance review. I don't want gold or gifts. I want warmth. I want something real." He didn't argue. He didn't say a word. He simply stood up, walked to the door, and left the room. 3 hours later, her phone rang. It was the agency. "Mr. Carlyle has terminated your contract. You're no longer employed at the residence." No explanation. No apology. Sophia didn't cry. She packed her things and left. No scene. No letter. No goodbyes. She went back to Oklahoma, where the air smelled like wheat and the nights hummed with crickets. She used her savings to buy an old trailer and turned it into a tiny library. Just shelves, second-hand chairs, and a coffee pot that never stayed full for long. She smiled for the kids who visited. But at night, when the trailer lights dimmed, she'd sit alone, staring at the stars, wondering if she'd been foolish. Maybe she'd imagined the tenderness. Maybe love wasn't something men like Matthew Carlyle could offer. And Matthew? He vanished. No press appearances, no interviews. He shut down 3 divisions of his company, canceled every contract, liquidated one of his funds. People speculated. No one knew where he went. Until 6 months later. One morning, Sophia heard gravel crunch in front of the library. She stepped outside. There he was. No suit, no driver, no guard, just Matthew Carlyle, standing in the Oklahoma dust, wearing faded jeans and holding nothing but his breath. "I didn't bring flowers," he said, voice lower than she remembered. "I didn't rehearse a speech. I don't even know if this is the right moment. But if you'll let me, I'd like to stop trying to be perfect. He paused. I don't want to own anything. I just want to be yours. Sophia didn't answer right away. Her arms were crossed, her jaw still, but then she softened, and after a moment she said with a trace of a smile, Then you'd better learn how to make coffee. We don't have assistants out here. For the first time in 10 years he smiled, and this time he stayed.